Commander Ryker Nash had experienced many bizarre situations during his 10 years with the Terran Space Force, but being captured by purple octopus-looking aliens while on his morning jog definitely topped the list. He wasn't even wearing his good running shoes. "You know," he called out to his captors as they dragged him through their ship's corridor, "on Earth, it's customary to at least buy someone dinner before abducting them." The Zyx'tarians, with their 8 tentacled limbs and bioluminescent spots, simply burbled something in response. Their universal translators must have been set to ignore annoying human. Nash made a mental note to file a strongly worded complaint with the Galactic Council about this violation of the Non-Interference Treaty of 2157. That is, if he survived long enough to file anything beyond his own death certificate. The ship shuddered, signaling their arrival at wherever these space squids called home. Through the viewport, Nash caught his first glimpse of the massive prison complex. The structure resembled a twisted version of a coral reef, if coral reefs were made of black metal and bad decisions. Massive energy barriers crisscrossed between towering spires, creating a web of containment fields that would make even the most determined escape artist think twice. "Nice place you got here," Nash commented as 4 guards escorted him through processing. "Love what you've done with the lighting. Very eternal damnation chic." The guard's spots flashed in what he assumed was irritation. At least someone was appreciating his commentary. Processing involved being scanned by devices that looked suspiciously like kitchen appliances, having his biometrics recorded by what appeared to be a possessed lava lamp, and being stripped of everything except his clothes. Thank whatever cosmic entity was watching for small mercies. "Commander Ryker Nash," burbled the chief processing officer, its tentacles waving in what might have been disapproval or indigestion. "You stand accused of trespassing in Zyx'tarian space." "I was jogging in Nebraska on Earth." Nash enunciated each word carefully, wondering if perhaps the universal translator was malfunctioning. "Unless Nebraska secretly became Zyx'tarian territory while I wasn't looking." The chief's spots flashed in a pattern that Nash was beginning to recognize as the alien equivalent of an eye roll. "Your species' presence in this galaxy is a trespass." "Ah," Nash nodded sagely. "So it's one of those situations. Let me guess. Humans are an abomination. We don't deserve to exist in your perfect galaxy, blah, blah, blah. You know, you're the 3rd species this month to tell me that. I'm starting to think we should make T-shirts." His sarcasm earned him a jab from some sort of shock stick. Nash decided that perhaps it was time to dial back the commentary, at least until he figured out what these aliens wanted. Besides giving him the worst morning workout of his life, the prison itself was a maze of corridors that seemed designed by someone who had heard of straight lines, but considered them merely theoretical. The walls pulsed with an eerie bioluminescence that made Nash's eyes hurt. Guards patrolled at regular intervals, their tentacles leaving slight suction marks on the metallic floor. "You know," Nash tried one more time as they approached what he assumed was his cell block, "there are easier ways to get to know humans. We have this thing called diplomacy. Sometimes we even use it." The guard captain, distinguished by its slightly more ornate uniform and particularly grumpy expression, turned all 4 of its eyes toward him. "Silence, human. Where you're going, your species' famous cunning won't help you." Nash raised an eyebrow. "Famous cunning? Well, that's flattering. Here I thought we were just known for our reality TV shows and processed cheese products." The guards stopped before a massive door that hummed with enough energy to power a small city. The captain's spots flashed in what Nash could only interpret as malicious glee. "Welcome," it burbled, "to your new home. Don't worry about getting lonely. We've arranged some special company for you." As the door began to open, Nash couldn't shake the feeling that these aliens had something particularly unpleasant planned. Still, he managed a grin. "I hope you remembered to put mints on the pillow." The guards' laughter echoed through the corridor as they shoved Nash through the doorway. "Have fun with the dragons," one burbled, its spots flashing in what could only be described as the alien equivalent of a snicker. "Try not to get eaten too quickly. We have a betting pool." "Dragons!" Nash started to turn around, but the door had already sealed behind him with a resounding thud. "Well, that's just perfect. Here, I thought this was going to be a boring Tuesday." The containment unit was massive, easily the size of a football field. The ceiling stretched up into darkness, occasionally broken by strips of that same headache-inducing bioluminescent lighting. The walls were scarred with what looked like claw marks, blast patterns, and was that acid burns. The floor beneath his feet was warm, suggesting some sort of temperature control system running beneath the surface. "Oh, good," Nash muttered to himself. "They've got climate control. Wouldn't want their dangerous prisoners to catch a cold while being eaten alive." A low rumble echoed through the chamber. Nash froze, carefully turning toward the sound. From the shadows emerged a creature that would have made Earth's fantasy artists weep with joy. It was easily the size of a city bus, covered in scales that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue. Its wings were folded against its sides, and its eyes glowed with an intelligence that suggested this wasn't going to be a simple predator-prey situation. "Fresh meat," the dragon rumbled in perfect galactic standard. "How disappointing. I was hoping for something more substantial." "Trust me," Nash replied, maintaining eye contact while trying to look as non-tasty as possible. "I'm nothing but lean protein and bad jokes, terrible for the digestion." A second dragon emerged from another corner, this one smaller but more serpentine, with scales that seemed to ripple like liquid mercury. "It speaks," the newcomer observed, voice carrying a musical quality. "And it has a sense of humor, how novel." "Quiet, Zyx'tarians," came a third voice, and Nash had to stop himself from groaning. Of course, there were three of them. The final dragon was built like a tank, with crystalline scales that caught and reflected the dim light. "Let's see what the Zyx'tarians have given us this time." Nash squared his shoulders and decided to take control of the situation. "Commander Ryker Nash, Terran Space Force, currently on an involuntary vacation courtesy of our tentacled friends upstairs, and you would be—" The first dragon's eyes narrowed. "You're remarkably calm for someone facing three dragons." "Well, I figure if you were going to eat me, you'd have done it already instead of making small talk. Besides, anyone the Zyx'tarians consider dangerous enough to put in here is probably someone I want to get to know better." The crystalline dragon made a sound that might have been a laugh. "I am Craxathor, former general of the crystalline armies. The one with the attitude is Zyx'tarian, and our Mercury friend is Zyx'tarians." "Delighted," Nash said with a small bow. "Love what you've done with the place. Very post-apocalyptic chic." Zyx'tarian's scales rippled with color. "A human. They threw a human in with us. Have they lost what passes for their minds?" "I'm sensing there's a story there," Nash said, leaning against a nearby wall with carefully calculated casualness. "Care to share with the class?" Zyx'tarians slithered closer, mercury scales flowing like liquid metal. "Your species has quite the reputation, Commander. The Zyx'tarians must truly hate you to place you here." "Or they're even stupider than we thought," Craxathor rumbled. "Humans are known for their ability to turn any situation to their advantage. To place one among us." Nash's grin widened. "You know, it's nice to be appreciated. Usually, aliens just call us primitive and try to blow up our planets. But I'm getting the feeling that we all have something in common, namely, a burning desire to ruin our host's day." The three dragons exchanged looks that spoke volumes. Finally, Zyx'tarian lowered his massive head to Nash's level. "Tell me, Commander, what do humans know about prison breaks?" "Oh, you know," Nash said, cracking his knuckles. "We've been known to get creative, but before we start planning anything fun, I have to ask, what's the food situation like in here? Because I missed breakfast, and planning a prison break on an empty stomach is just asking for trouble." The dragon stared at him for a moment before Zyx'tarians burst out laughing, the sound like chimes in a storm. "Oh yes," the Mercury dragon said. "The Zyx'tarians have made a terrible mistake indeed." "So," Nash said, sitting cross-legged on the heated floor, while Zyx'tarian tossed him something that looked like a space protein bar. "What brings three distinguished dragons to this lovely establishment?" Craxathor rumbled deep in his crystalline chest. "The Zyx'tarians invaded my homeworld. They feared our crystalline technology could be weaponized against them." The massive dragon shifted, his scales catching the light. "They weren't wrong." "You should have seen it," Zyx'tarians chimed in, mercury scales rippling with excitement. "Craxathor took down three of their capital ships before they managed to capture him. It was quite the light show." Nash whistled appreciatively. "Not bad, though I'm guessing they didn't appreciate the fireworks." "About as much as they appreciated me turning their precious neural network into abstract art," Zyx'tarians said, preening slightly. I'm what you'd call a data dragon. We can interface directly with computer systems, swim through data streams like your oceans. And by interface you mean hack? Nash grinned. Hack, enhance, completely destroy. It's all a matter of perspective. Zyx'tarians' scales rippled in what Nash was beginning to recognize as amusement. Did you know their entire communications network went down for 3 solar cycles? Pure chaos? Zyx'tarians snorted, a small jet of flame escaping his nostrils. At least you two put up a fight. I simply refuse to give them access to my people's dimensional folding technology. Apparently, no isn't in their vocabulary. Dimensional folding, Nash perked up. That explains the color-shifting scales. You can manipulate space. On a local level, Zyx'tarians confirmed. Useful for storage, travel, combat. Not so useful against an entire invasion fleet that caught us by surprise. Nash nodded thoughtfully, pieces falling into place. So, we've got a crystal tech warrior, a data swimmer, and a space folder. No wonder they put you all in the same cell. You're their worst nightmare combination. We've tried escaping, Craxathor said. 7 attempts, each time we got further, but they keep adapting their security, Zyx'tarians finished. Every failure teaches them more about our capabilities. The energy barriers are now resistant to crystalline disruption. Their computers have new firewalls specifically designed against data dragons, and they've installed dimensional stabilizers throughout the prison. Nash stood up, pacing as he thought. Classic mistake. They're so focused on countering your specific abilities that they're not thinking about how those abilities could work together, or with something completely different. The dragons watched him pace, their interest clearly piqued. And what would you suggest, Commander? Zyx'tarians asked. Nash stopped, a gleam in his eye. Tell me something. Those dimensional stabilizers, they prevent you from folding space, right? But do they prevent space from being folded around them? Zyx'tarians' eyes widened. I'd never considered that approach. And the firewalls, Nash continued, turning to Zyx'tarians, they're designed to stop data dragons from accessing the system. But what if the system was already compromised by something else? Something they weren't guarding against? Like crystalline-based code, Zyx'tarians' scales rippled excitedly. Now you're getting it, Nash grinned. See, that's the thing about humans. We're not the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced species out there, but we're really, really good at looking at different pieces and seeing how they could work together in ways no one expected. Craxathor lowered his massive head. You have a plan. Better, Nash said, rubbing his hands together. I have the beginning of a plan. The rest will depend on how much you trust each other, and how much you're willing to trust a human you just met. You want us to work together in ways we haven't tried before, Zyx'tarians stated. But why should we trust you? How do we know this isn't some elaborate trap? Nash shrugged. Because right now I'm snacking on what tastes like compressed cardboard while chatting with 3 dragons in a prison cell. Trust me, if I was setting a trap, I'd have at least packed better snacks. The dragons exchanged looks, having one of those silent conversations that only comes from spending too much time locked up together. Show us, Zyx'tarians finally said. Show us how humans solve problems. Nash picked up a piece of debris from the floor and began drawing in the dust. Okay, lesson 1 in human problem solving. Sometimes the best way through a wall isn't to break it down. It's to convince the wall it was never there in the first place, and lucky for us, we have exactly the right combination of talents to make that happen. As Nash explained his initial thoughts, the dragon's expression shifted from skepticism to intrigue to something approaching excitement. By the time he finished his rough outline, even Zyx'tarians was nodding thoughtfully. This is either brilliant or insane, Craxathor rumbled. Why not both? Nash replied cheerfully. In my experience, the best plans are usually a healthy mix of the two. Now who's ready to give our tentacled friends upstairs the worst day of their lives? The answering grins from 3 dragons would have sent the prison guards running for their mothers, if they had been there to see them. First rule of prison breaks, Nash said, drawing a rough map of their cell block in the dust, is understanding that every security system has 3 weaknesses: patterns, pride, and pancakes. Pancakes? Zyx'tarians' mercury scales rippled in confusion. Well, technically it's people, but I'm trying to maintain the alliteration. Nash grinned. Guards follow patterns. Designers get prideful about their systems, and people make mistakes. Always. Over the next few hours, Nash had the dragons describe every detail of their previous escape attempts. He paced as they talked. occasionally stopping to add details to his dust map or ask pointed questions about guard rotations and security responses. "See, your previous attempts were too direct," Nash explained. "You tried to overwhelm their systems with pure power, but humans, we learned a long time ago that the best way to beat a stronger opponent is to make them defeat themselves." Craxathor rumbled thoughtfully. "Like your earth martial art. What was it called? Judo?" "Exactly, and I'm not even going to ask how you know about earth martial arts." Nash clapped his hands together. "Now, let's talk about how we're going to combine your abilities in ways these octopi never imagined." He turned to Zyx'tarians. "Those dimensional stabilizers, they're calibrated to prevent large-scale space folding, right? But what about microscopic folds, tiny ones, just big enough to disrupt electronic signals?" The purple-scaled dragon's eyes widened. "That might be possible. The stabilizers are designed to prevent folds large enough for escape or combat." "Perfect. And Zyx'tarians, how close do you need to be to a computer system to interface with it?" The Mercury dragon coiled thoughtfully. "Within 20 meters, typically. But their firewalls are formidable. They won't be looking for crystalline code structures, though, will they?" Nash turned to Craxathor. "How small can you make your crystals?" The massive dragon's scales clinked together as he shifted. "Small enough to be microscopic, but they would need to be precisely placed, which is exactly what Zyx'tarians' microfolds could do." Nash's grin was downright predatory. "See where I'm going with this?" Over the next few hours, Nash outlined a plan that made the dragon's previous attempts look like brute force battering. He taught them human concepts of asymmetrical warfare, distraction tactics, and the art of making the enemy's strength work against them. "The key," Nash explained, drawing a complex diagram, "is timing. Zyx'tarians creates a distraction in their secondary systems, nothing too big, just enough to draw attention. Meanwhile, Craxathor produces microscopic crystals that Zyx'tarians places through tiny space folds into crucial junction points. The crystals will act like Trojan horses," Zyx'tarians realized, scales shimmering with excitement. "Once they're in place, I can use them to bypass the firewalls entirely." "Exactly, and while their systems are compromised, Zyx'tarians creates a series of small spatial distortions, not to escape through, but to disrupt their sensor grid. They'll be so busy trying to prevent a large-scale fold that they won't notice their own security protocols being rewritten." Craxathor's crystalline form sparkled as he processed the plan. "And once their systems are compromised?" "We give them a choice," Nash finished. "Either they let us walk out, or we demonstrate exactly why throwing 3 dragons and a human together was the worst decision they've ever made." The preparation was meticulous. Nash had them practice their timing repeatedly, using smaller and smaller tests to perfect their coordination. Craxathor spent hours practicing crystal formation at microscopic scales, while Zyx'tarians worked on creating space folds smaller than a dust mote. "Remember," Nash advised as they refined their roles, "the goal isn't to fight our way out. It's to convince them that fighting isn't worth it. Humans call it shock and awe. You don't have to win every battle if you can make the enemy believe fighting you is hopeless." They used mealtimes to map guard patterns, maintenance checks to identify system vulnerabilities, and even the ambient noise of the prison to mask their preparations. Nash taught them human military hand signals, creating their own modified version that worked with dragon anatomy. "What if they catch on?" Zyx'tarians asked during one planning session. "What if they realize what we're doing before we're ready?" Nash's smile was all teeth. "That's why we're also preparing 3 backup plans, 2 false trails, and what I like to call the nuclear option. Though in this case, it's more of a dimensional crystal data cascade option. Trust me, by the time they figure out what's really happening, it'll be too late." As their preparation neared completion, Nash gathered his unlikely team. "Tomorrow we start Phase 1. Remember, timing is everything. Zyx'tarians, you'll initiate the false security breach at exactly 3 clicks past guard change. Craxathor, your crystals need to be in position. 2 clicks after that, Zyx'tarians. You'll have a 30-second window to place them through the microfolds." The dragons nodded, their expressions a mix of anticipation and focus. They'd come a long way from the skeptical prisoners who'd first met Nash. "One last thing," Nash said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "No matter what happens, we stick to the plan. No heroics, no last-minute improvisations, unless I give the signal. The Zyx'tarians expect dragons to be proud and powerful. They expect humans to be clever but limited. What they don't expect is all of us working together like a well-oiled machine. And if something goes wrong? Craxathor asked. Nash's grin returned wider than ever. Then we moved to Plan B, which is like Plan A but with significantly more explosions, or Plan C, which is like Plan B but with dimensional rifts, or Plan D, which, well, let's just say we won't need a Plan D. As they settled in for one last night before the attempt, Nash looked at his unlikely team and felt a surge of pride. The Zyx'tarians had thrown him in here thinking the dragons would end him. Instead, they'd given him exactly what he needed to engineer their downfall. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. The guard shift changed exactly as predicted, the sound of suction-cupped feet squishing against metal floors, echoing through the corridors. Nash gave his team a nod. Showtime. Zyx'tarians' mercury scales rippled as the dragon began interfacing with the nearest terminal through one of Craxathor's microscopic crystals. Initiating primary distraction in 3, 2, 1. Throughout the prison, every toilet suddenly flushed simultaneously, repeatedly. Really? Zyx'tarian rumbled. That's your big distraction? Trust me, Nash grinned. Nothing gets maintenance crews moving faster than a plumbing emergency. Besides, it's not the distraction, it's the cover for this. On cue, Zyx'tarians triggered the second part of their plan. Every environmental control in the facility began reporting critical failures. Temperature sensors showed simultaneous heating and cooling. Pressure readings fluctuated wildly. Atmosphere composition monitors started reporting impossible numbers. Maintenance crews are responding, Zyx'tarians reported, scales flickering with suppressed laughter. Security is diverting forces to protect crucial systems. Nash watched their dust-drawn map as Craxathor positioned his crystals. Zyx'tarian, you're up. Remember, small folds, precise placement. The purple dragon scales shifted through spectrums as he concentrated, creating microscopic spatial distortions. Through these tiny folds, Craxathor's crystalline seeds found their way into crucial junction points throughout the prison's infrastructure. Alarms began blaring, but not the ones they were triggering. These were coming from completely different sections of the prison. Ah, Nash said proudly, looks like they found our false trail right on schedule. The prison erupted into chaos. Guards rushed to contain non-existent breaches. Security systems reported phantom intruders. And through it all, 3 dragons and 1 human moved with practiced precision. Phase 2, Nash called out. Zyx'tarians, start the cascade. The mercury dragon's form seemed to liquefy as it interfaced with their planted crystals. Through each microscopic seed, streams of corrupted data began flowing into the prison's networks. Security protocols rewrote themselves. Door controls responded to phantom commands. They're trying to lock down the systems, Zyx'tarians reported gleefully. They have no idea they're actually giving us more control with each countermeasure. Nash turned to Craxathor. Showtime, big guy. Give them something to really worry about. The crystalline dragon reared up, his scales beginning to resonate at a frequency that made Nash's teeth itch. Throughout the facility, every crystalline seed began vibrating in harmony, creating a symphony of destruction that overwhelmed sensors and shattered less robust equipment. Zyx'tarian, Nash shouted over the cacophony. Time for the grand finale. The space-folding dragon's eyes gleamed as he began creating distortions, not the tiny ones they'd used for infiltration, but massive, visible warps in space, not actually functional for escape, but terrifying to witness. Guards who had rushed to their section stopped dead in their tracks, tentacles writhing in alarm as they witnessed 3 dragons performing impossible feats, while a human stood in their midst, directing the chaos like a conductor before an orchestra. Now, Nash called out, Zyx'tarians, hit the lights. The prison plunged into darkness save for the bioluminescent glow of panicked Zyx'tarians and the ethereal shimmer of Craxathor's crystals. Zyx'tarian's spatial distortions bent what little light remained, creating dazzling, terrifying displays. Attention, Zyx'tarian Prison Administration. Nash's voice boomed through the facility's own communication system, courtesy of Zyx'tarians' control. I hope you're enjoying the demonstration. This is just a small sample of what happens when you put 3 dragons and a human together and give them time to get creative. A particularly brave guard squadron attempted to advance. Craxathor casually created a crystalline barrier that refracted their stun beams back at them. The squad went down in a heap of twitching tentacles. Here's the situation, Nash continued, thoroughly enjoying himself. We currently control your environmental systems, security protocols, and communications. My scaly friends here can turn your facility inside out, literally in one case. You have exactly 2 minutes to decide. Let us walk out of here or find out what else we've planned. They're attempting to lock us out through the backup systems, Zyx'tarians reported. Nash's grin widened. Activate Protocol Pancake. Throughout the facility, every screen began displaying the same image, a short stack of fluffy pancakes dripping with syrup. It was completely harmless and utterly terrifying, because it proved they could put anything they wanted on those screens. The facility's commander finally responded, its voice trembling slightly. What are your terms? Simple. You open a path to the landing bay. We take a ship. We leave. In exchange, we don't collapse your facility into a singularity, expose all your secret files to the galaxy at large, or see if Zyx'tarians here can fold the entire prison into a nice origami swan. You're bluffing, the commander burbled. Nash sighed theatrically. Zyx'tarians, show them camera feed 47B. Every screen switched to show the commander's private quarters, where an embarrassingly large collection of what appeared to be stuffed Earth kittens was displayed. Next time, Nash advised, don't keep your personal access codes in a file marked definitely not access codes. They met no resistance on their way to the landing bay. Guards flattened themselves against walls as they passed. 3 dragons moving in perfect formation around a human who strolled along as if he was taking a pleasant walk in the park. You know, Nash commented as they approached a suitable ship, I almost feel bad about how easy this was. Almost. Don't, Crystalline rumbled. They'll think twice before underestimating humans or dragons again. As they boarded their commandeered vessel, Nash turned for one final announcement. Oh, and about your systems, you might want to check your calendar program. It's set to replay this entire sequence of events every year on this date, just as a reminder. The look of horror on the commander's face was almost as satisfying as their actual escape. As they broke atmosphere, Zyx'tarians turned to Nash. Did you really program it to repeat annually? Nah, Nash laughed. But they'll spend months trying to find and delete code that doesn't exist. Sometimes the best weapon is paranoia. The dragons exchanged looks of newfound respect. Humans, they were learning, could be more dangerous than any natural weapon, especially when they had dragons as friends. As their stolen ship cleared the prison's gravity well, Nash noticed something on the sensors. We've got company. Looks like the other cell blocks got inspired by our little performance. Behind them, the prison was erupting into full-scale rebellion. Inmates of various species had seized the opportunity created by their escape, overwhelming the distracted guards and taking control of entire sections. Should we help them? Crystalline asked, crystalline scales glinting in the starlight. Nash studied the tactical display, a slow grin spreading across his face. You know what? I think we should. After all, it would be rude not to finish what we started. Zyx'tarians' mercury form rippled with excitement. The prison systems are still compromised. I can remotely access everything we set up. And I still have a few spatial distortions in place, Zyx'tarians added, scales shifting through shades of anticipation. Nash cracked his knuckles. Let's show the Zyx'tarians why you never put an apex predator in charge of a prison break. They swung the ship around, but instead of charging in guns blazing, Nash had them hold position just outside the prison's defensive perimeter. He opened a broadcast channel to all frequencies. Attention, all prison staff and inmates, this is Commander Nash, the human who just waltzed out of your maximum security cell with 3 dragons. I see some of you are feeling inspired. Good. Here's what's going to happen next. Throughout the prison, both guards and inmates paused to listen. The prison leadership, barricaded in their command center, felt their color drain as Nash continued. To the prison leadership, you have precisely 10 minutes to surrender control to the inmates' newly formed council. Yes, they've already formed one. Amazing how quickly oppressed people can organize when given the chance. As if to emphasize his point, Crystalline's planted crystals began resonating again, creating a harmonic frequency that made every piece of crystal in the facility, including the precious control crystals in the command center, sing in harmony. If you're wondering how we're doing this, Nash continued cheerfully, don't bother. You wouldn't understand it anyway. Just know that this is only the beginning of what we can do. For example, Zyx'tarians interfaced with their systems again, and every security door in the facility cycled open and closed in perfect rhythm with the crystalline resonance. HFY added his touch, creating visible spatial distortions around key strategic points. "Look at it this way," Nash offered. "You can surrender now and keep some dignity, or we can get creative. And trust me, you haven't seen creative until you've seen what happens when you combine crystalline resonance with spatial folding and a human who's had way too much time to think about physics." In the command center, the prison leadership watched in horror as their displays showed the full extent of their vulnerability. Every system, every backup, every fail-safe was compromised. And worse, the inmates were organizing with frightening efficiency. The prison commander spots now a pale shade of defeat, finally opened a channel. "What are your terms?" "Like I said, surrender to the inmates' council. They'll ensure fair treatment for all prisoners and staff. Oh, and one more thing." Nash's voice took on an edge of steel. "You're going to send a message to your government explaining exactly why treating other species as inferior is a bad idea, especially humans, because next time we might not be so nice about it." The surrender took exactly 8 minutes, Nash timed it. As they watched escape pods carrying the former prison leadership launch toward the nearest Zyx'tarian outpost, Crystalline turned to Nash. "You never planned just to escape, did you?" "Let's just say I believe in thorough problem solving," Nash replied. "Taking down one prison is good. Making sure they think twice about imprisoning anyone else unjustly is better." "The stories about humans are true then," Zyx'tarians observed. "You really do change entire systems just by existing within them." Nash shrugged. "We're adaptable. We see problems, we fix them. Sometimes that means breaking out of prison. Sometimes that means reorganizing an entire penal system. It's all in a day's work." As their ship finally turned toward free space, Nash looked at his unlikely crew, 3 dragons who had become more than allies in their short time together. "So, anyone up for starting a prison reform consulting business? I hear there's a growing market for it." The dragons' laughter echoed through the ship as they left the transformed prison behind. Somewhere in the galaxy, a group of Zyx'tarian bureaucrats was about to receive a very interesting report about why underestimating humans was a terrible mistake, and if anyone noticed that the prison's computer systems now played Earth music every time someone tried to access the security protocols, well, that was just Nash's way of signing his work.